Local leaders from all over the state gather in Tucson for an annual conference.
Benson is projected with 28,000 homes to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70,000 in growth, total population by the time 15 to 20 years elapses.
How the League of Arizona Cities and Towns connects communities.
This is over 1,000 people attending this conference every year, and it's really become a must attend for people in the government sector.
From the JW Marriott Tucson Star Pass Resort and Spa, this is Arizona Week. Hello and thanks for joining us. We're in West Tucson at the JW Marriott Tucson Star Pass Resort and Spa. This week, leaders from throughout the state are here for their annual conference. Arizona's 91 municipalities are represented. Here's the Executive Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Ken Strobeck, the Executive Director, thank you so much.
Yes, my pleasure.
Let's talk about what the services are offered to the people who come here, the municipalities that are here this weekend.
Well, this conference has really grown over the years to be the premier government conference, not just city and town government, but we get people from obviously from the state government, from county governments, from, basically today even from the federal government. They all like to come here because this is sort of where you can catch up on everything that's going on in the public sector at every level of government. And if you've seen the number of classes, breakout sessions that we usually have 5 or 6 going at any one time and have 4 of those sessions over the course of this conference. So there are many, many opportunities for people to really drill down into the things that are challenging their communities, get some answers, and of course have lots of opportunity to meet with other city leaders that are going through the same challenges that they're experiencing. So this is over 1,000 people attending this conference every year, and it's really become a must attend for people in the government sector.
We've heard from a lot of smaller governments here who will say they feel supported by being exposed to all these other big cities. Is that what you would say is maybe the goal of something like this?
Well, I think that's one of the goals. I think there's also value that the big cities get out of this too, which is to talk to other big cities and also figure that the small cities are having some of the same challenges that they are, just on a different scale. But we try to have enough program variety that it appeals to everyone, whether you're from a large city or a small city. And by and large, when you get to the issues that deal with municipalities and shared revenue and economic development and transportation, those are all the same issues that every city faces. They're just scaled a little differently depending on your population and your landmass size.
How would you describe Arizona's overall economic picture?
Well, I think it's better than it was, and it's not where it should be yet. It's recovering, but it's recovering at a slower pace, and especially we're seeing that at the city and town level. There are many cities that had major cutbacks during the height of the recession, and they're still not back to pre-recession levels either in their budgets or in their staffing levels. And now part of that has caused people to have to do more with less, be more efficient, be more innovative, and that may have resulted in better use of tax dollars. So that wasn't all entirely bad, but still when the programs are cut and not brought back, the public misses out on some things, and so I think we're cautious that things are getting better, but we also are concerned about some of the policy decisions made at the state level that are still affecting cities and towns.
A big component of this conference is talking legislatively what the legislator can do for communities.
Right.
What would you say is the major takeaway from those discussions at this point?
The number one thing that we would tell the legislature if they would do would just to do nothing as far as cities and towns are concerned, because usually what happens when city and town legislation comes up, it's somebody that wants to take away our authority, limit something that city officials can do, reduce our revenue in some way, benefit a special interest group. So for the most part, we operate quite well on our own, and we like to do that. We provide very different services than the state government, different services in the county government, and generally we oppose legislation rather than run legislation. So we're tending to play defense most of the time. So the number one advice I would say is if you see a bill that affects cities and towns, it's probably not something that's doing more good for cities and towns and the people who live in them.
Is there a disconnect between legislators and city leaders then?
In many ways, it's a matter of just not understanding, because so few state legislators have had local government experience. So a large part of what my staff and I end up doing is simply educating people about, here's how your city operates, here's what they do, here's where they get their revenue. Because we get revenue from different sources than the state gets revenue. And so they're not aware of some of the impacts of their policy decisions. So a lot of what we have to do is to just explain what we're doing and how we're doing it to state legislators.
Earlier you mentioned transportation. How big of a component is transportation for a small town to a large city?
Well, it's immense. I can't really quantify it other than to say it's central to everything that goes on in cities and towns. And we, for years, have had the battle about HERF funds and the constant reduction of HERF funds, diverting that. LTAF and other funds that have been eliminated that used to provide some assistance for mass transit or for dial-a-ride, even local bus services and things like that. So not only road maintenance and street maintenance, but those other kinds of alternative transportation sources have been drying up over time, and that really does affect the quality of life, livability of communities.
Speaking of quality of life, education continues to lag in the numbers here throughout the state. How do you sort of rally the troops for city local leaders to tell them that Arizona is still a place to move to?
Well, education is interesting because it's vitally important to cities and towns, to the health of our community, but it's not something that cities have any control over in Arizona. And so I think the most that we can do in education is to help rally public support for quality education, and obviously that has a direct impact on economic development, which is really where cities and education interface.
Benson is a small town along Interstate 10, and its potential for growth is looming. Toney King, the mayor of Benson, and Bill Stevens, the city manager, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Bill, let's get started with you. How would you describe the economy of Benson?
Like many communities across America, the downturn in our economy in the mid-2000s, 2007, 8, has impacted Benson as well. Benson's a small community, so the diversity of businesses is not as great as in a larger community. So it paid a heavy toll initially, but the good news is our economy is beginning to slowly recover. It's even getting better here in the last year and a half, and it's also improving in Benson. And the exciting part about Benson relative to the economy is it is key and located centrally right on Interstate 10, and it's between Sierra Vista and Tucson, so you can go in either direction. We've of course got Karchner State Park at the Karchner Caverns, and so we have a number of visitors that come there. So our economy is beginning to improve quite a bit, and I believe, and we'll talk a little later about some of the things that are going on in Benson that are beginning to, I think, improve the projected economy for the future, hopefully for the next 15 to 20 years at least.
Mayor King, you've been there a little bit longer than Bill.
Yes, I have.
You've seen a lot of change over the years, and I imagine you're quite hopeful for the short term, long term.
Oh, absolutely, especially with, if you don't mind me saying, the new development. It's been my dream for years. There was a time when we had, in mid-2007, 2008, as the downfall started to come, we had a dream of the development coming in, which it was coming in, and then the downfall came and it all left. Now that I'm in my 14th year, the dream has come back, and I believe that with this development coming in, it's something that I believe will happen, and it's something that I think that it will enhance the community to a point where it's going to be absolutely amazing.
You're referring to the Tuscan style living. I believe 28,000 homes is the projection. Is that correct?
It is.
It is. Slightly controversial. There's some concern over the water resources in that community, but it sounds like you are really excited for what this could mean for the future and the economy and overall growth of the town.
Yes, and on the water side of it, we've had many studies done on the water side of it. I'm very confident as mayor, and I wouldn't say this unless I truly mean it, that the water's there, and that it's something that will be a lasting thing for Benson. Versus 60,000 homes in originally planned, down to 28,000. Right there shows a huge part of conserving water right there. We're being fiscally responsible of what we're doing now. So there's a huge difference in what was originally planned. So,
Bill, right now there are about 5,000 people living in Benson, 28,000 homes. That could conceivably more than quadruple, probably, at least to start, the population. What is that? How does that change the dynamic of the town?
It does change the dynamics of the town. The town, much like the city of Maricopa, that started at about 4,500, we're at 5,100. They grew to a little over 45,000 in population, and Benson is projected with 28,000 homes to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70,000 in growth. Total population by the time 15 to 20 years elapses. And of course it depends on the economy in terms of how fast that growth will occur, but nevertheless it will change the dynamics. We are already actually seeing phone calls from potential investors and business owners who wish to come to town. I'll give you an example. We have 4 parts stores that sell automotive parts in our city. I'm already getting phone calls from other parts store companies that wish to come to Benson. Despite the competition, they can see the potential on the horizon for the economic impact, and many of them want to be there.
Mayor, who are you expecting to come? Are these retirees? Are these families with young children?
I'm expecting quite a bit of retirees, but I'm also expecting families. And that's my dream, is to see more families come to Benson. I love my retirees. I love them. They've done absolutely amazing. They come in every year from about October through
Roughly March.
March.
Some stay over through into
Into April, and I love it when the city grows and they come in. I love it. But I would love to see more families come in. With the houses being built, I vision jobs coming too. As Bill says, we're having a lot of calls already. And remember, this is at the beginning stage. Again, the vision is there to see with the houses, the jobs are going to be there. And I believe that it will be a variety of people that will be coming. But I'm hoping that more families come down. We have one of the best school districts in the state, as you know already. They outmatched Val in the last scoring, so we're very proud of that. And we envision more schools being built, and of course other things being built in Benson. So I'm hoping that we have a lot more families come in.
And Bill, you've already received some recognition from the Tucson community. There are people who live or work in Tucson and drive home to Benson because it's getting out of the city life.
Sure, absolutely. You know, Arizona has had an influx of residents, many of whom came from California, for example. In California, and I've lived there, it's not unusual to commute 2 to 3 hours one way. And fortunately, that's not the case here. For someone to live in Benson and commute, say, to Tucson, it's approximately an hour. And there's improvement right now by Arizona Department of Transportation for Interstate 10, both east and westbound lanes between Benson and Tucson. So it's just going to get better over time. The infrastructure will be able to support that influx of individuals. But to get a job either in Sierra Vista or Tucson, it's roughly 45 minutes one way and an hour another. And I already have neighbors who live in Benson who are already making that commute, even before this development breaks ground and begins to develop.
Exciting times are ahead, Mayor, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And I want people to realize is this is not just a sudden 28,000 homes coming in. This is over a 20-year period. So we are being very cautious on how we do this. We're being very resilient on making sure we're making all the right choices. And I feel that that if we do it right this first time, when something else comes in, we learn and we'll be able to make sure that we got it right throughout. So.
Okay, not ruling out the small town charm. Mayor
No.
King, Administrator Bill Stevens, thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Douglas is a border town whose fiscal health is dependent upon the economies of both the U.S. and Mexico. There's been some negative news coming out of the border town recently. Some bank closures, the hospital closure. Let's start with the hospital. How is that, do you see an immediate impact to the community?
Obviously, the immediate impact is really we no longer have an emergency room services in town. From a hospital perspective, obviously it's an impact, but it's not significant as the hospital was not really seeing that many patients in the past. They were probably averaging anywhere between 2 to 3 patients a day in terms of staying at the hospital, as most of them basically traveled to either Bisbee or to Service and then ultimately to Tucson to receive their care. So that's from an acute care perspective. Obviously, that sends a wrong message in terms of a business or a hospital closing. Obviously, it really gave us a sense of insecurity, a sense of really not having other resources available that we used to have in the past. And it also created an impact for us transporting the patients out of town to the closest facility, which is Bisbee. And ultimately, if we need to take them to Service, then that's really what the impact is. So it basically our turnaround time to deliver the patients to the hospital and back to the station, it went from 30 minutes or 20 minutes down to now an hour. And so that's certainly an impact to us that we're trying to react and trying to prepare ourselves depending on what we got to do in the near future.
The town recently lost a bank or two. What
Yes.
happened there?
Well, obviously, some of those banks are concerned in terms of really what's going on with the Bank Secrecy Act. Obviously, we do a lot of trade back and forth, legal, legitimate trade back and forth. They saw as an issue really that they didn't have the resources really to track the money all the way in terms of not just the person, but beyond that was making the transaction. And it really became to be a liability for them, and yet the return to protect the return on the investment and the effort was really not there. So as a company, as a corporation, they said, well, we probably don't want to be in the bank business in the border. So that's why they relocated not only out of Douglas, but several communities in Arizona. And my understanding is they did the same thing pretty much in other states. So what it really obviously created some sort of insecurity, some sort of, hey, we're going backwards instead of really moving forward. But it basically, what it really provided, the folks that were left behind, the other institutions really, they were able to pick up more accounts. They were able to be more profitable than they were before. So it's really just a matter of really, I would just even things out for them.
A major grocery chain pulled out a few years back, then the banks, now the hospital. That's got to be tough as far as promoting the city. So what do you tell people that is positive that might think maybe we do want to reinvest in that town?
Well, I think one of the things we got to be realistic is who we are and kind of where we're going. It's obviously, if you look at the city population of 18,000 residents, we have a lot to offer in terms of other communities our size. I think the biggest opportunity for us is really continue to really facilitate cross-border traffic. We heavily rely on that. We estimate that over 70% of our city sales tax revenue comes in from across the border. So that's a big component of that. The other industry that we have, which is not really an industry, but a major sector in the economy, is government. Unfortunately, government spending is not increasing; it's actually decreasing at all levels: municipal, state, and federal government. And we're heavily dependent on that industry. Basically, what is happening is we are not seeing the growth rate that other communities are seeing. So you look at prior to the recession, a lot of folks were seeing an increase in terms of city sales tax, construction. We didn't see that. We were at the tail end of that. We saw a little bit of an improvement, but we really didn't see a whole lot. Now, moving forward, we're saying is, well, the economy is picking up. Well, we may see, right now, we may see an increase in terms of what's happening in the U.S., but we really, it's compensated again by the peso devaluation across the line. So if now we make a reduction in terms of folks coming across and shopping Douglas, well, that's going to be an impact. So we feel that we get the short end of the stick, not only what happens on the U.S. economy, but also what happens on the Mexican economy.
Yuma is known for its heat, agriculture, and military. And city manager Greg Wilkinson says it's more than just a pit stop to San Diego. Describe Yuma to me.
Well, Yuma is a community. I'm originally from the Midwest, and Yuma has really grown to be a fairly big community. However, it still maintained that friendly atmosphere. People in Yuma work together like no other place I've been, and obviously the patriotism and the support of the military, that's kind of really the heart of the community. Everybody works together and a very patriotic community.
Yuma often gets a bad rap in the press with the unemployment rate. If you would
Right.
describe how that happens and what that really means for you.
Yeah, well, you know, in the city of Yuma, our unemployment rate's about 13%, you know, and they talk about a 20% unemployment in the Yuma metro area, which includes San Luis, which is a border community, Somerton and Welton. The unemployment rates there are a little bit higher. But one of the issues that we have really is that we've tried to work on is we've brought in a joint technical education district to try to help with job training to get people fit into the right jobs. And then, of course, the other thing, we are a huge ag community, $3.2 billion a year in ag produce. And, you know, just that cyclic unemployment, you know, hurts us. And that's just kind of the nature of ag communities. And, you know, our employment is much better, obviously, from November through April when they're in full swing.
So some growth, and you actually mentioned 3% growth in some areas?
Yeah, for the last 3 years, we've had about a 3% growth in revenue. So, you know, we've pretty much recovered. Our retail is the highest it's ever been. All the areas really have recovered, except for construction. And of course, construction was way out there, and we don't expect to come back. But even that's coming back some. So we're actually looking pretty good right now.
Yuma also has its fair share of winter visitors.
Yes.
How important are they for you?
Well, that's our number two, you know, for our economy. Yuma, the city of Yuma goes from about 100,000 to probably around 150 to 60,000, and then the whole area probably increases population by about 80 to 90,000. Obviously, they bring in a huge amounts of money into the economy. It's beautiful weather, you know, in Yuma in the winter. And all kinds of things are happening all winter. So they're really important to our economy, coming in from Canada and all over the U.S.
Marine Corps Air Station Yuma really representing the culture of the community, as you
Right.
said. Where would Yuma be without the proving grounds, without military installations, period?
Right. Well, when you come to Yuma, we'll show you the City of Yuma airplane and tell you how we brought back you know, the Marine Corps Air Station back to life after it had been shut down. But yeah, you know, it's really the heart of the community. The people there are so supportive of the military. It's the first base to get the new F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, and now it's the first place to have an operational squadron. We're very proud of the Marines there and the things that they do. All the training that goes on there with weapons and tactics instruction course, and it's the busiest base in the Marine Corps.
There are a lot of people who would not think of Yuma as this central hub for so many different facets of the economy, environment, lifestyle. What would you say to them?
I would say come and visit. You know, we have everything. We've put in about $10 million into our riverfront, 3 new beaches. We have some wetlands, we have beaver. A lot of people come there, you wouldn't think, but they come there to do bird watching. We have the Yuma Territorial Prison, which the city now runs, Quartermaster Depot, tons of golf courses, you know. So a lot of things happen there. People are swimming on the river all the time. You know, in the winter we have our Blues Festival. There's just a lot of things going on, and people really need to get off the interstate and come in and see what it's about.
Nestled between Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon, Page may be out of sight and out of mind for many, but that may be changing. Here's Councilman Levi Tappan. How do you describe Page to people?
It's a beautiful town right on the state line of Utah. We have Lake Powell, the tourism community.
About 8,000 people population?
8,000 people, yep.
Describe, is it families, is it retirees?
We don't have a lot of retirees. We do have, it's families, very family oriented, the service community.
A lot of attention up in the northern area over the last couple of weeks with the mine spill in Colorado. How did that affect your community?
So we're right at Lake Powell, the shores of Lake Powell, South Shore, as some of us like to say. It is in our water system, but it should dissipate before it even comes to Page.
Was that a concern to a lot of families in your community?
A lot of people were concerned, but we're not concerned.
Something like this, the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, how does that help maybe network you with other city leaders and expose you to other communities?
So I really like coming to these type of things. Arizona is actually 2 hours north of Flagstaff. People think that Flagstaff is the end of the state.
Or page.
or page. So I like to remind people that page is up there and get down here. We're 4 hours from the Capitol also, so it's good to see people that we wouldn't normally see.
Are you able to learn a lot about the way other cities and towns run?
That is one of the things I like, what I call best practices. So what's working in your town, what's working in your town.
Okay.
We can't copy all of your ordinances, but we can find the ones that would work for our town.
What sorts of things is Page experiencing right now? Is there growth? Are there any challenges?
One of our challenges, we're surrounded by federal land, so our internet capabilities haven't been the best. So we're working on bringing some infrastructure to Page.
For people who might want to visit Page, what's there for them to see?
We have beautiful things. Actually, one of the biggest things is Horseshoe Bend. It's been actually on a lot of political commercials talking about the Grand Canyon, but the picture is actually Horseshoe Bend, which is in Page.
A lot of communities in Arizona are still recovering from the recession. How would you describe Page's economy?
We are a tourism economy, and we get lots of European and Asian tourists, so we're doing really well with the way that, since the American dollar is down, we're doing really good with foreign tourism.
Any projections for growth in the next year or so?
We're pretty landlocked, so I don't see a lot of growth as far as residents, but I'd like to get we need to work on some affordable housing and get some young professionals back into town.
Being next to the Navajo reservation, are there challenges that your town faces?
We are a border town, and that's federal land, so again, we're surrounded by all these federal lands that make us landlocked. And the Navajo reservation is one of them. But what I've been doing is trying to reach out to Tuba City and some of the other reservations. And I mean, I grew up in Page, so I wrestled with all these communities in high school. So,
When you say you reach out to them, what are you really hoping to gain when you reach out?
working together, they have no alcohol is allowed on the Navajo reservation, so we get a lot of their population into town.
Tourism is a big part of Page's economy. Are there appropriate accommodations for the growth that you're seeing?
So we've had 3 hotels open in this last year and plans for 2 more. We have an area, like the Hotel Circle of San Diego, we'd like to get some more hotels in there. The prices are kind of expensive, but we're hoping these hotels will bring the price down. Just some beautiful scenery. And since the next towns are about 160 miles away, so we have lots of beautiful land around us for scenery. Lots of photography opportunities.
And that's our program. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine, Rivera.